Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCV Means Business, the podcast of the Santa Clarita Valley Economic Development Corporation, where we meet the leaders of great companies making a difference in their community. I'm Holly Schroeder, your host today, and I'm very pleased to have the CEO of DrinkPAK, Nate Patina, joining me today. Welcome, Nate.
Holly, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
Great. So we've taken a while for us to get this scheduled, but I'm excited to talk to you today. Because DrinkPAK has been sort of taken the Santa Clarita Valley by storm. You guys are really growing fast. So let's start with the basics. Why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about what DrinkPAK does?
Absolutely. DrinkPAK, think about DrinkPAK as kind of the manufacturer that you never knew existed. So we contract manufacture about 2 billion cans a year of all the beverages that you can think of, all the major energy drinks and the sodas and the beer and wine and canned cocktails and waters and everything in between. So we're kind of that in-between layer of the universe where a brand is a marketing organization. If I'm an energy drink, I am worried about designing and formulating the best tasting product, the best looking product that I can, and then hand it off to somebody like DrinkPAK to take that and take all the materials and batch and blend and fill and pack and distribute the product. So we're kind of the great in-between of how a brand interfaces with the world and ultimately how they get their products to market. So we make a lot of product. We're the largest contract manufacturer of canned beverages west of Mississippi right now and move a lot of product in and out of Santa Clarita.
So how much? I mean, give us a sense of scale here because it's pretty significant.
Yeah, so we'll move, in the next 12 months, we'll move just over 2 billion cans out of here. From some perspective on that, there's about 2,000 cans on a pallet. So we're moving thousands and thousands of pallets of product a day out of Santa Clarita. We're processing up to 1,000 trucks a week of inbound and outbound cans and materials and everything that you can imagine. So generally speaking, we'll supply most of the Western United States. So if you take a big energy drink customer for us, we'll anchor 7 or 8 Western states of the U.S. For some of our maybe higher price point customers that sell canned cocktails or things of that nature, we may do all the way out to the central U.S. and further. We may do Canada and Mexico distribution. We'll support Asian distribution and export business for them here out of the ports in Los Angeles, Long Beach. So we move a lot of product on a daily basis. Each one of our lines will put out between 1,000 and 1,500 pallets of product. So run 24/7, have about 300 employees here in Santa Clarita. Poor Holly knows that 2 years ago when we came and had nobody, said, I think we can do this relatively quickly, and we went from 0 to 300 quickly. We'll add another couple hundred employees here on Santa Clarita Valley over the next year, 18 months as we continue to build out our facility. But it's a very large operation. There's a lot of moving pieces to it, figuratively and literally.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about the progression that's gone on there. Because when we first got introduced, you guys were looking for like 30,000 square feet, right? It was a pretty small or modest request at the time. And now you've got close to, $750,000? So that's a big jump in a couple of years. What was the business plan transition that evolved during that window to have you grow so fast?
I think my team, my partners, my senior team, we're longtime beverage brand builders. So going back to 2009, co-founded and ran a kombucha company called Kavita that we sold to Pepsi back in 2016. Ran a water company called Core Hydration that we sold to Dr. Pepper back in 2018. Have been very cognizant of being brand builders that are kind of continually leaning on where we believe not our customer, which is the brand itself, but the consumer, the end user of products, where they're going and what they're thinking of and what they're drinking. And we say we kind of have the sexiest non-sexy industry out there, right? Which is nobody really cares about where beverages come from. What they care about, though, is it's funny how, you'll have you'll be making small talk with somebody, and it's funny how quickly you'll hear, oh, my kids are drinking this, or I just tried this new thing, or there's this cool new product that it is something people talk about. And we, from our brand building background, spend a lot of time focused on where we think the ultimate consumer is going and what they're thinking about, more so than most manufacturers, contract manufacturers do. Contract manufacturers generally are worried about widget in and widget out, or thing in and thing out, and spending less time trying to triangulate where the consumer is going. So the thing that we were, I think, uncertain of when we decided to start DrinkPAK a couple of years ago was, we have been fortunate to have been customers in our brand days of a lot of our direct competitors now. I think we had assumed that we had a better mousetrap, a better way to do this, a more high-tech way, a more 2.0 way, if you will, or 3.0 way of doing this. And I think we wanted to put our toe into the water to see, and we were very quickly kind of consumed by the tidal wave of way more demand and way more opportunity than we had ever assumed that there would be, and very quickly transitioned that into kind of taking our legacy brand connections and our relationships with a bunch of major players in beverage, and transition that into being their kind of tier one anchor of the Western U.S. very quickly, much quicker than I think we had assumed. So this became, as you noted, went from a 20 or 30,000 square foot endeavor to we're just about to breach 1 million square feet here in Southern California. And it was something that we just tried to respond as quickly as we possibly could.
So that better mousetrap is in part the level of automation and robotics that you have. You're going to have 3 lines. To try to describe what somebody would see if they walked into your plant and how that line operates.
Yeah, so I use this, and I probably beat this horse to death, but I use the great illustration that I think when people hear of beverage manufacturing, the first thing that comes to mind for folks of a certain age, maybe not necessarily my Gen Z employees, is Laverne and Shirley, right? The idea of somebody watching bottles going by and people staring at widgets, flying here and there. That's anything but what a kind of modern high-tech beverage facility looks like. So a facility like ours, we have $150 million of German equipment, beverage equipment. When you walk in, the cans on our lines move up to 2,000 cans a minute on our lines. You need a strobe light to see what's going on. They move so quickly. You're filling on each of the lines 35 cans a second. So it truly physically is a blur of watching things go by. You'll see a pallet of product come off the line every 35 or 40 seconds. You're filling a truck in 7 or 8 minutes. It is an immense amount of product very, very quickly. So it is very much a 2.0 version of how folks think of manufacturing and assembly lines. Instead of an old, large brewery where you might have 30 or 40 employees on a line at a time, we will have 5, 6, or 7. They're not low paid, low skill jobs. They're highly paid, automation level, very skilled labor, employees even down at our hourly ranks. It is akin to standing and watching an iPad and looking at a computer screen much more than it is the physical world about what a piece of equipment is doing. So it looks and feels very, very different from kind of the classic picture of what you think of when you think of manufacturing a good. Some kind of product. So,
yeah. So tell me more about those employees. So, what types of skills do they need? As you said, this is not low skill. This is high skill jobs, and it's actually pretty high tech, pretty robotic. So, what kind of people are you looking for?
Generally speaking, so if you look at kind of the on the ground operators and technicians, they're folks that have some manufacturing background, right? That have some bridge, and they can come from aerospace. They can come from, food and beverage. If they've been in kind of a high tech environment, they can come from any number of flanking industries that are much more concerned with looking at, HMIs and staring at screens and looking at numbers and data and analytics much more than a traditional manufacturing role where you're, let's say cutting open bags and, baking bread or moving loaves of bread. Those are 2 different styles of things. So on the ground level, those are kind of our level of employee on, the operator technician level. Beyond that, anybody really even at a supervisor level or above with us, degrees in mechanical engineering, degrees in electrical engineering, degrees in automation, there is so much of a focus on that it is system driven, it is process driven, much more than it is kind of seeing and visually reacting to what's going on and kind of playing the triage game of, whack-a-mole, if you will. It's really not that. It is very much taking folks with an engineering background, business backgrounds, and applying it to historically what had been a very old-fashioned industry where it was more, I hate to say grunt labor, but it was more physical, tangible, and less of the kind of thinking and automation component. So that really is how this has changed over the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. One of the big things that a lot of companies are talking about that I think is really interesting because, of course, you think about beverage manufacturing, you think about the environmental and the sustainability issues, and we talk maybe a little bit about water and the efficiency there, and also cans, right? Like you used to never be able to get wine or drinks, like a mixed drink in a can, or even frankly water in a can. It was always in a bottle, and that's changing. And there's reasons for that.
Yeah, I think you touched on two really important things there, and there are, taking them kind of in reverse order. There is a gravitational pull on 4 or 5 different levels to the aluminum can. So we have some very good, very close competitors of ours that are absolutely plastic only, that only do plastic. And they own that vertical, they manage that vertical, they do extraordinarily well in that. But it is no surprise that obviously there is an environmental concern on plastic and being petroleum based, and the fact that plastic can only, in theory, be recycled 2 or 3 or 4 times before it gets too brittle and breaks down. And the fact that we really generally don't recycle plastics at the same amount that we do aluminum in the US. So there's kind of that gravitational pull. The aluminum beverage can is already 100% post-consumer recycled. It's infinitely recyclable. You can take a beverage can and melt it down and reform it a billion times, and it'll never degrade. So there is that component to it. There is the very real reality that what you just said, Ali, is completely correct. 10 years ago, you would have thought, I'm going to buy a 12-pack of Coca-Cola for $3.99, and that's the only thing I'm going to buy in a can. And if you asked me to spend $15 on a 4-pack of canned cocktails, that was never going to happen. That world has completely upended in the last 5 years. There is no upper limit to what a consumer will spend in a can. They don't look down their nose at as cans as a non-premium product. So you have some of the great wines in the world in can. You have the great spirits brands in cans. There is no upper limit to what a consumer will pay now. So it opened up the floodgates to being able to run every product style. So when we looked at this from a design thesis, we said we need to be able to run any can. We need to own the can. So we don't run plastic, we don't run glass, we don't run Tetra Pak or the kind of the soup carton. We run none of that. We run only cans, but we have to be able to run it all. So that if a consumer substitutes and they don't want to drink a soda anymore and they want to go to a sparkling water or they want to go from an energy drink to this, we need to be able to kind of run all of those styles of products, and we do. So that's kind of the can component of it. It's substantively more environmentally friendly than plastic and all the rest of those things that are very true. On the water side, okay.
Well, before you go on to the water side, what has driven that? Is that because the materials of like the coatings on the inside? It used to be like people thought it like the can kind of contaminated the taste in some way for certain types of beverages. Has the technology evolved, or what's really driving that? Do you think, or is it just consumer acceptance?
Yeah. It's consumer acceptance. So that's a funny thing, right? Because that was seriously, truly was kind of an old wives' tale that was propagated by the makers of plastic and glass bottles, which is, a plastic bottle has much more opportunity. So plastic is permeable, right? Which is why if you grab a Coca-Cola off the shelf life in a can of Coca-Cola is about a year. The shelf life in a plastic bottle is about 4 months. And that's because plastic is so permeable. So it's susceptible to inclusion from oxygen and any other odors. If you leave it in your fridge next to something smelly, it will literally leach through the plastic. An aluminum can is not that way. So the aluminum can and the belief that somehow an aluminum can would change the taste of a product is just something that had been propagated for a long time.
So
consumers had just kind of, we've been conned. Consumers very much got over that, and they've gotten over that in a very specific way with what is probably the most difficult product to transition, which is pure water, right? It is, I will say this, drinking pure water from a can still feels a little bit unnatural You're used to drinking water from a plastic bottle or from a glass. You're not used to thinking that you're going to open up a can. You're expecting bubbles or you're expecting flavors or something. It is a little bit different experience. The fact that there is such an unbelievable burgeoning generation of new just water products going into a can, I think was the last of those dominoes to fall as the consumer is starting to accept the idea that I can drink the most pure thing that I can ask for, which is just water, and get that out of a can. I think it is kind of completing the transition of being able to accept any product style in a can. But it's a great question because it's something that had kind of lingered for a long time. So, to your question on water,
you got a very efficient process as you go through things, right?
yeah, so to just I'll use nice round generic numbers that ebb and flow, but the nature of what we do for a living is about as water efficient as you can get. So to put this in perspective, for every 100 gallons of water that we use and process as a plant, about 90 of those 100 gallons ends up in the product, in a can, on the shelf, being consumed by a person. So we only discard, if you will, about 10% of water that we use. If we were a brewery, brewing beer or something of that nature, we would discard 300 gallons for every 100 gallons that we pack into finished product. So instead of wasting 300% of water, we have about 10% of water waste. Now, what that generally is, that waste is not waste like people spraying things down and having it go down the drain. The majority of that is that we have to treat the water. We have to do an incredible amount of treatment to get that back to a very standardized reverse osmosis water. And the reason that is because if you're an energy drink or a soda or a beer, you want that product to taste the exact same here that it does in Pennsylvania, that it does in Europe. So you have to standardize the water. What that means is we have to take the mineral water that we get from the municipal district, which comes very high in mineral content, maybe 1,000 parts per million of calcium and magnesium, and we have to basically remove that component of the water. So we concentrate it and we discard as little as we can, and we use as much of that water, the discard water, as we can to cool things in the plant and to use as washdown water. But from a pure efficiency standpoint, we're 20 or 30 times more efficient in water than a brewery would be. So we have an odd relationship, right? Because obviously California is a very tight water state, but I think the fact that 9 out of every 10 gallons we touch goes right back into the food stream and is used as product people are consuming and drinking makes it about as good of a water usage as you could have in a state like California.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about how you came to Santa Clarita. This is where I get to do my plug, and why California, right? So why did you decide you wanted to be first in California, but then also a little bit landing here in Santa Clarita?
Yeah, so California is an interesting spot. I'm a Midwestern native, right? So I'm a 15-year transplant here in California. We have the great benefit of every company that we've owned and run has been based here in California. We've had the pleasure of building facilities here in California. So, listen, the reality of the business climate in California is no surprise to anybody. Yes, the regulatory bars are higher, and yes, the labor is more expensive, and yes, taxes and all the rest of it. Yes, that is true. But it is also true from a consumer goods manufacturer that we have the people. We are where the people are. And we very much viewed it as we were kind of uniquely positioned as folks that had only really built facilities in California. We were used to some of those hurdles. And I think the goal for us was we need to be in Southern California where the vast majority of people are, so that if you're an energy drink maker, you're not having to pick the product up from 2 states away and pay double the price of what you're paying to pack it to ship it back into California. There's an enormous physical cost benefit to our customers and ultimately to the consumers to try to fight inflation that gives them a leg up that they didn't have otherwise. Within that, then, within the thesis of we need to build our first plant in California, then comes a question of where can you do it with the least friction, with the most painless process. And I would say this in Holly's presence or not, Santa Clarita is kind of the gem. It is the way for a manufacturer like us to go through process, to interface with a city that wants you there, with a county that wants you there, if you can control the process properly, and do it in a way that kind of takes the teeth out of what everybody is afraid of doing business in Los Angeles County, in Southern California, in kind of the climate that has been known for. And, we had a great experience candidly up in Ventura County in prior universes, and it was always that feeling that nobody really wanted to come back into LA County. And I think the first time that we met Holly and the EDC folks realized that not only is there an opportunity to do this in LA County, which is absolutely where we wanted to be from a distribution perspective, but it doesn't have to be painful at all. So we crammed a lot of chaos into 12 or 15 months during the middle of COVID, during the middle of supply chain nonsense, in a historically difficult business environment. And we're able to do that successfully. I've not been around a city that is as welcoming, that has been as good to deal with as Santa Clarita has been and as LA County has been to us, in a way which we never anticipated. And it's been a wonderful process for us, and it gave us all the reason in the world, other than the fact that there are no more buildings available. There's nothing stopping us from doing more business here in Santa Clarita because it has been such a wonderful experience for us.
Well, it was pretty crazy to, you decide to start this whole business and the new business model and stuff in the middle of the pandemic. That was pretty gutsy. But I guess the, question as we look ahead, I'm doing podcasts with our economists. Lots of people are wondering, what's going on in the economy and what does the future hold? What does, from your business perspective, what is that economic outlook, and what is maybe the product mix you have tell us about what's happening in the economy?
I will say that we will see over the next year or two. The thing that I am most confident of in how we design our business is I don't lose sleep over the boom bust cycle. We're about as acyclical as you can be. And I mean that because our customers, or ultimately the end consumer, will substitute within the types of products that we produce, right? So as Holly and I were discussing offline the other day, two schools of thoughts, in a recession when money is tight and inflation's up, are you going to spend as much money on $15 packs of canned cocktails as you were before? Well, one school thought, no, because I don't have the disposable income. The other thought is, I'm depressed in the middle of a recession, maybe I'll drink more. And maybe you trade down. Maybe you trade down and you're drinking more energy drinks, or you're drinking more, sparkling waters, or vice versa. In good times, you're trading up to something that you can afford more of. The reality from our business model perspective is it doesn't really make a difference. We run all the products at the same speeds. They basically all pay about the same amount of money. So we have kind of built a model where the substitution effect kind of makes us agnostic to what's going on. That being said, to your question, we certainly see a gravitational pull towards an enormous uptick in back to the kind of the core staples, and I would include energy in core staples, but energy and flavored waters and things that had kind of been on the precipice. I would say that there's even an opportunity where, if you think of kind of commodity cost flavored sparkling waters and sodas, I think folks are taking maybe some of the super premium products they were buying, and they're willing to trade one step down to buy a more premium version of a soda, or a more premium version of a sparkling water, or something like that, where there's kind of in between categories that are thriving right now. But from an aggregated business perspective, people never stop drinking, right? They never stop buying products. They never stop buying things in cans. And with how easy it's gotten in an Amazon delivery universe, in an e-commerce world, and in an Instacart, it's so easy to get delivered products these days. It doesn't even require going and schlepping them from the stores like it used to, that the sky is the limit right now for just about anything in a can. So,
well, I'm glad to hear your optimistic outlook. In part, as you said, you got several hundred employees now. You're now one of our largest employers, and certainly largest tenants in our buildings. And it's just an amazing economic impact that it has on our community, with the good quality jobs and the involvement that your company and your employees are having in the community. So really greatly appreciate all the good economic development that you've contributed here in town, and great products that you're making. So thanks for joining me, Nate.
No, I mean,
appreciate it. Yeah.
Hey, we could not be happier to be here in Santa Clarita, and I've said this to you many times, Holly. The great help that you provided on the front end made this the easiest decision we have, and I don't think there's anybody happier right now in the midst of some weird economic times. There's nobody happier than we are right now to bring as many jobs as we have and to create as much as we can generate from a business perspective and bring this kind of fun stuff to Santa Clarita. There's nobody could be happier than we are right now. So appreciate everything that you've done for us.
And if I remember right, you can tell if it was made by DrinkPAK, right? If you're looking at a can of something, right?
So on the alcohol stuff, on all the alcohol products, it literally says produced in Santa Clarita, California, because that's a requirement of the Tax and Trade Bureau. So that'll say it quite plainly on the cans. For everything else, generally, if you flip it upside down and you see a DP somewhere on there, you're going to know that it's us on the codes on the bottom of the can. So a lot of products, and you'll start looking like a weirdo in a grocery store turning cans upside down to see where it was made. So.
All right. So for our listeners, check out the can of whatever you're drinking, your favorite beverage. Check out where it was produced and see if it was produced by DrinkPAK. So thank you, Nate, for joining me today. Thanks everybody for listening, and please subscribe to the podcast. SCB Means Business, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.